Hi everyone, I'm Will, the Paint Beast, and in this video we're going to take a look at painting gold armour. Hey mini painters, we're going to take a look at the process of painting some standard gold armour. This simple scheme gives a solid foundation for armies like Stormcast Eternals or Custodes, and adds a little something extra to give your armour a deep tone. I want to show you how to master the basics of painting metallics, give you the foundations to build a really nice rich gold colour, and show you how adding a little bit of colour can give us just a little bit of extra depth. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and when you subscribe, change that bell icon to all so you don't miss out on notifications for my future videos. Now let's get painting some gold.
So, what do we need to paint this gold armour? Well, first thing you need is gold spray paint. I've got Retributor armour here. I really like the colour of Retributor armour, but I can understand why people don't like this particular spray. It does cost a lot. I got this half price from a local gaming store that was discontinuing the sale of Games Workshop products in favour of just becoming a board game cafe. There are other golds out there, so do your research and you'll find some good ones. Colourforge do a good one. And I can never get hold of it because it's always sold out. That's how good it is. Anyway, the paints for the actual gold, once we start painting, are Retributor armour. So the pot version of that, which is obviously much cheaper than the can. Agaros Dunes contrast paint. This is what's going to give us a nice rich gold depth and tone to the armour. Some contrast medium, which we're going to use to help shade further with some Leviathan purple to give it a bit of a purple tint, and then some Runefang steel just to give it an extra bit of a highlight, and as we go up through the mid-tone as well, we're going to give it some Retributor armour sort of layers just to help it sort of blend together a bit better. What else do we have? We have a wet palette. Now you'll notice that during this video, and I think the previous video that I made, I use the wet palette for metallic paints. There is a common misconception that you can't use a wet palette with metallic paints. The common misconception is that the metallic pigment and flakes that are in the paint will seep through this paper. That's not true. It doesn't do that. I don't know where that came from, but that was a long-term belief that would happen. As long as you don't let the water flow onto the paper and draw the metallic paint into the sponge or into the water, you should be fine. But again, if you want to use one of these, which we are also going to use today, that's more than fine to sort of thin your metallic paint down. So yeah, we've got the plastic paint palette. We've got, as usual, we've got our 2 jars or crucibles of clean water, one to wash, one to rinse. Handy bit of paper towel. Other than the wet palette, I definitely would say it's one of the most important things in your painting arsenal. We've got a couple of pipettes. Now you may have seen a previous video where I accidentally squirted colour into the clear medium. I've now decided that I'm going to use 1 pipette for colour, 1 pipette for medium, so I never ever mix it up again. And then we've got 2 different brushes for this. We've got our fine sort of detail brush or layer brush. This is a Raphael Kalinsky Sable size 0, very good brush. And this is just an old Games Workshop Citadel brush that I got in a magazine, I think. This is only to apply the washes and the contrast paints, because we don't care so much about it. It's not very, I mean, I think after 1 use of this brush it started curling at the tip, but I understand Games Workshop isn't a brush manufacturer, they're a miniatures and games manufacturer, so they're forgiven. Right, where do we start? Well, once we've sprayed, your miniature should look like this. And what we're going to do in this video is we're only going to do the gold parts. I'll pick up the other details either in another video or somewhere else. So where to begin? Right, we need our Agaros Dunes first. and give that a shake. And we're not going to thin it down or anything. It's just going to be pure Agaris dunes. And we're going to apply that straight onto the miniature. We're going to make sure that all of the pigment is out of the brush from our previous painting sessions. And we're just going to slap this on. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see all the fun and all the detail. Whoops, drop the brush then. There we go. Right, we're going to start at the bottom of the miniature to sort of gauge how our paint is working, and then carry on up the miniature. See, the reason I start at the bottom is because people don't tend to look so much at the bottom. They will more focus on this area when they first look. So if we make a mistake on the foot here, it doesn't matter too much because we can, A, we will be able to rectify it. We just need to paint over it again. But B, people aren't really going to look at those parts of the miniature. We don't want to flood the miniature with contrast paint at this stage. If you find there's too much in an area, just wipe away some of the contrast paint on a paper towel and go back, and then just touch your brush to it like that, and it'll soak away all of the paint. You want to be quite quick at doing that and realizing it, because if you start to do that maybe in about 3 minutes, once the paint is starting to dry, you'll end up only wiping away the paint from the sort of middle area, and you'll be left with like a coffee stained ring around that, around where the paint was. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop all of the, pop paint over all of this miniature. I'm going to sort of leave out the areas where I might paint with a different colour, like this sort of scale mail and other details, like maybe the haft of the weapon. We're just going to make sure that there's one thin coat all the way around, and then we'll come back again. We'll do another thin coat to give it a lot more depth. And I'm not doing the shield on this video either, just because as I mentioned, I want to try and make this one a bit quicker. So you've got the tutorial for the metal armor, the gold armor, so you know how to paint that on not just Stormcast but other miniatures as well, maybe Custodes. But for all intents and purposes, you can do this really quickly on a big sort of group of miniatures, and get them done whilst also having fun. So we're going to leave that to dry, and once it's dry, we're just going to put another, maybe a thinner coat of Agaris dunes on top of that, just to bring the shadows down a bit more. But it's looking okay at the moment, and there's no reason you need to do the second layer if you don't want to, but we're going to do that so I can show you what it looks like. So I'll bring this miniature back when it is dry. And as if by magic, it has dried. So this took maybe 5 or 10 minutes just to dry fully. And it's really important that you don't apply more contrast paint until the first layer is completely dry. It's because you'll pull away some of the paint that you've already applied to it. But let's carry on. So what we're going to do is we are going to just measure out some contrast medium and Agaris dunes, and pop some in the plastic palette. I'm going to do it in my usual Agaris dunes section just there. So I'm just going to do 1 to 1, 2 to 1. So 2 drops of Agaris dunes, of contrast medium. I'm going to do 4 of these, and then 2 of the medium. Do 2 of the paint, and then mix it up with the brush. I'm going to do some Agaris dunes as well. So there's 4 drops of the medium in there. We're going to put 2 drops you see what I've done? I have unwittingly put the coloured paint into the pipette that I had set aside for the clean paint, the contrast medium. Oh well. Just make sure I clean it out thoroughly. Alrighty, so let's mix that up with the brush that we don't care so much about. Brilliant, and then we're just going to do exactly the same. So we're going to apply this to the miniature. We're just making sure that we pull sort of in the downward sections. And this one's going to be more of like a glaze to slightly, ever so slightly tint the entire surface. So you don't want this to be really pooling at all, to be contrary to what I've just said. You want it to just darken the surface ever so slightly. And this is the point where if you haven't let it dry correctly, you'll notice that some of the paint is being pulled away. And if that happens, just stop, let everything dry, and then go back to the first step. You can even put some more Retributor armour in, sort of cover it, paint the section with Retributor armour, and then start again. So I've quickly just gone over the miniature to do that. Just give it a glaze so it's slightly, ever so slightly darker. And now I'm going to go away and I'm going to let it dry again. So probably pop back once it's dry. So that has dried now. Like I said, it's very important just to make sure that everything dries fully before you start painting again. As you can see, we've sort of introduced a nice dark tone to this gold armour and given clear definitions in most of the recesses, which is very important because that helps the eye define each part of the miniature and makes it easy to read. Now the next thing we're going to do is use some Retributor armour to build up some highlights and some volumes of light on the armour. And when I say volume of light, what I mean is, you see this section here that's catching the light? That is a volume of light. So any one of these shapes that you see on the miniature, like this knee pad here, this circle, we're going to build up the volume of light from the bottom to the top. And I always think of it like this. The volume of light is strongest at the top, it's shouting the loudest. So it's a volume of light. And we're just going to try and do that over all of the metallic gold parts. So we're going to take our Retributor armour, give it a good shake because it's a nice new pot. Take our nicer brush because we've finished with the older one, and we are going to just pop some of that on the palette there, maybe 2 scoops of the brush. Rinse our brush off in the dirty water paint, rinse it in the rinsing pot, and then any moisture, any water that's left on the brush, we're just going to put into that Retributor armour and swizz it around in there, mix it all up just to make it flow really nicely. Then we're going to take the brush and we are going to just wipe it once along the paper like that, so that all of the excess water gets drawn out of it. And then I'll show you how to do this on a few parts of the miniature, and then I might go away and finish it and then bring it back on screen just like we were doing with the drying. So anyway, with the paint that's left on your brush, you're going to select the area here. You're just going to sort of push in towards the area that you want to make it look brighter. And you should see that it started to make that shine a lot more. And this is almost like, this is a layering basically and a sort of glaze. I'm just going to carry on doing that until we're happy. And we don't want to go too much into the area where the contrast paint is pooled. We kind of just want to keep at the top there. There, you see that? It's actually quite a good representation because there's almost a line, but there's not quite. We can break up that line by just gently dabbing our brush all over it just to give it a bit of texture, and then it looks a bit more natural. We're just going to do that in most of the places on the miniature that have, you know, surfaces that look like they need to be reflective. So on this sort of like armor panel here, we don't want to go too far into this recess or around these like sort of studs. We're going to just keep in the center. We're going to go in from the sides, and if we do have to come too close to this, we can just draw a line around there like that and go into there, and just make sure it's a bit mottled, because metal reflects from all different angles and it depends what's on around the surface. So we can kind of get away with just being a little bit, tiny bit messy. And I assume this person's going to have been in battle as well, so we can kind of do streaks with our brush, like just really quickly, to make it look like it's a dented or scraped piece of armor. Key places to do this are definitely the chest, the knee pads, the shoulder pads, and the head. But I can see a line on that chest going up there. So what we're going to do is just going to go back to it with the thin paint, and we're just going to really gently just push the paint from the bottom to the top like that. Just wipe away that line. Now for the maybe for the more subtle areas, like this collar, what we're going to do is just put a few dots just in between the rivets, and then edge highlight this top bit here, the top of the head. It's a bit thin, this paint, so I'm just going to add a bit more into it. Like, don't ever be afraid or think you're doing it wrong if you have to keep going back to modify the paint that's on your palette. I don't think I leave the palette alone. Like, it's always being, like, the paint on the palette is always being tampered with. In fact, I'd say, not that you're doing it wrong, because I don't think there's any way of doing this wrong, but if you're not concerned about at least one part of the paint on your palette and thinking it needs to be better, then you should probably start thinking about it. You're edge highlighting this bit. Just going to catch that shine on top of there. Same with the hand, just dragging the paint to the topmost part, or at least not the topmost part, but the part where we want to have the shine. So on the knee here, we want it to be at the top here, almost towards the edge of the sort of trim on the armour. And we can pull it a little bit from the bottom as well. Used to be a bit thinner because it's making streaks. It's very subtle, this. And this is, a lot of people get frustrated at this type of painting, especially nowadays where speed paint is pretty much king. This is all about building layers, making sure that the layer before the one you're working on has an effect on the layer that you're working on. So each layer affects the one after it. Or, in this case, we're pretty much affecting the layer before this one because we're brightening it. So basically, you're just making sure that each consecutive layer builds on something rather than it being its own thing. I'm just going to take some of that darkness out there because I don't like it. There you go. Just thin that down a bit. That Doesn't look too good, that, but I've made a mistake there, but that's okay. Just put some water on there, remove everything. Back to our paper. Again, just it's a bit hard with these metallic pigments because they do tend to get everywhere, but I think I've saved that bit. We can come back to that when it's dry and do it again. So we're going to work on the other leg. This knee pad here. See, I've done a mistake again. I've gone too far into that. Water on the brush, dry the brush on the paper towel, and then just wick away the paint pigment in there. You have to be really thorough with the metallic paint, like I said, because it will be the sort of metallic pigment will get into those areas and float around. What I'll probably have to do on this armour panel here, I'm just going to have to go away and do that Agrex Dunes step again, just to make it look neater. This one here looks okay, it looks very shiny, quite nice. For the more intricate bits, like I said, you don't need to put so much water in, as long as you've got control of the paint on your brush, and then you can, if I can get it to focus, hold that there. On the sort of abdominal things, you can just put a solid layer of paint just on these, because all of the shading is around in the recesses. And as I've got some on the brush, I might as well put just like a solid highlight at the top of these bits. Right, so we're going to do the top of the knee there, the side of the leg there, just here, and then we haven't done anything on the back yet, so just on these calf bits here. Just gonna do exactly the same thing, just where we think the light needs to go. We're just gonna sort of push the pigment around in there, just catch the top edges of that, and on the back here as well. Push the pigment up to the top. This is a very thin layer of this paint. You don't need to go hard on it at all. And if you think anything looks messy, just spend a bit of time and go back to it. There's no use in thinking it's, you know, it's ruined just because you made a small mistake or it doesn't look quite right. I always find with miniature painting that if it looks rubbish at a certain stage, you just have to keep going until it looks good. It's especially so with when I'm painting light flesh tones, like Caucasian skin. It always looks rubbish until it looks alright. I wouldn't ever get disheartened if you think that something's not looking good and you're putting effort in. You just need to keep going and it will look good. You can also take a break as well if you find that it's getting too frustrating. There's nothing wrong with that. Go and play a video game or something. One of my favourite pastimes is video games other than this. I don't play enough, but then I've learned a lot in this, and I tend not to get too frustrated nowadays, unless there's something very hard. Right, that's messed up a bit, but that's okay. I think I might just do that bit again. So for most of that armour, we've highlighted it. I might just do a little bit more on the face, just because we want that to stand out a bit more in the end. Actually, if I can get my lighting just a little bit better, so you can see. Right, so what we want to do here is just on the flat parts of the face. We're just going to put quite a strong layer of Retributor armour, and if we need to we can come back in and do some more shading. I think that's fine. We've kind of sort of highlighted the bit that needs to be viewed. Then we can do edge highlighting just on the sort of halo. Nothing too strenuous. And remember, you want these troops to look, I mean, you want them to look okay if you're painting a troop model like this, but you'd want to spend lots more effort if you were doing a hero or an HQ miniature. Cool. So what's the next step from here? We're going to use some contrast paint again. Now we're going to introduce. You could stop here, right? This is looking pretty cool, but why not push it one stage further? Or 2 stages further. Let's put some interesting colour on this. Now, purple looks really good with gold. So what we're going to do is we're going to thin down quite a lot of this. Well, we're going to thin down by quite a lot this Leviathan purple. So we're going to give it a good shake up, both the medium and the paint. We're going to take we're just going to make sure this is clean. We're going to take our clean pipette. You don't have to do all of this paint. The reason I'm doing so much is because I'm demonstrating. But as long as you thin it out enough, so I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drops of contrast medium to 2 drops of Leviathan purple. Now you could do, that's a 4:1 ratio, by the way. So 4 parts medium, 1 part Leviathan purple. If you want, you can do it with scoops with your brush just to save a bit of paint. So 1, 2. It's a very strong paint, this one. I did it again. Just going to make sure that this pipette is clean. I've got plenty more spares in case we need to use contrast medium again. And then, as always, we're going to add a bit of clean paint, clean water to this. We're going to put 2 drops in here just to dilute it a little bit further. And then with our bigger sort of brush we don't care about so much, we're going to mix it up. So it still seems quite thick, right? Still quite a strong colour. But that doesn't matter so much because we're going to take most of it off the brush. We're going to go back to our good brush. Let's put these back here so you can be reminded of what they were. We're going to take a little tiny bit on our brush, just a little bit. I'm going to go to the paper towel and take most of it away. In fact, that's a bit dry, so we're going to wet our brush a bit. Get some more on the brush. Wipe most of it away. Test it on the bottom of the miniature first, remember. But we're going to use this like a glaze. At the bottom of the miniature, we're just going to touch and drag down and just introduce a little bit of purple on here. That's going to really make the armour much more defined and give it a nice, interesting tone. Again, like I said, you don't have to do this part. This part is purely choice, but I think it looks good. In fact, I probably will paint most of my gold this way from now on. And we're just going to keep going back to the paint, just taking most of it off the brush, just so we end up with a glaze. And then I'm going to do the chest just so you can see, and then what I'll do is I'll go away, paint the rest of the miniature with this glaze, and then wait for it to dry. So you're going from the top to the bottom, introducing that tiny bit of purple just to make it look a little bit more interesting. And the reason I'm using contrast paint and not something like, say, this shade, Dripsy Violet, is because a contrast paint, especially thin down, you can direct where it goes. You can say to it, stay there. You know, you can say, give me a gradient from this bit here down to this bit here, but most of it should stay here. In fact, I'm going to demonstrate it. So the shade won't do that. The shade will make everything look slightly purple. So if we do that on the other side here, we can tell it to pool at the bottom, but it will make absolutely everything purple. And we don't want that in this step. Just going to wash all that away. We want to have some control over it, which is why I prefer to use the contrast paint for this. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to do the same. If I think of anything interesting to tell you or make a mistake, I will keep that in the video. But until I do that, I'll see you once this is complete. Okay, so I've done that all around the miniature, and one interesting thing that I'd like you to note is, do you remember this this armour trim here on the shoulder pad where I made that mistake and I said I was going to go back and do it again? Well, what I decided to do was show you what the difference between adding the purple on the armour after all of the steps is between that and doing it just directly over the Retributor armour gold. As you can see, there's no depth in that. So if you were to add that purple as a second step rather than washing the whole thing after you've sprayed it with Leviathan purple, it would just look a bit as though it had less depth. But anyway, that's what this looks like. Now there's one more step you can do to make this stand out a bit more, and that's give everything a sort of edge highlight with a silver, and we're going to use Runefang steel for that. It's a very thin paint, and it works brilliantly to give just a little bit of an extra pop for gold armor and silver armor as well. So we're going to give it a good shake up. This one's quite an old pot, so it's not going to be flowing, I don't think. No, so I need to give it a good shake. There you go. And then just put some of that on the palette. So I'm going to have to dive into the pot to do that. I've had this for a number of years, this paint. So, using a bit of water just to thin it down slightly and make it really fluid. Again, as always, just wipe the paint off on the brush. And I'm going to show you what it looks like on the chest pieces, and then basically we're going to be applying this to every surface that is vertical or horizontal on top. So a vertical space, we're going to turn it upside down so we drag the pigment to the place where we want it to be. And we are going to, if I can get the camera to focus, we're going to put a line there, and you'll need to do this 2 or 3 times to actually make it visible, because this paint is quite thin, but that's why I like it. It's going to be very subtle, almost gradient blending for this. There you go. And then across the top on each part. Again, I encourage you to move the miniature around so that you get easy access to the best spot. You don't want to keep moving your brush hand around so you're rotating that. Move this, not this. You want this to be sort of within this range, so you can just use your fingers to move it around. You don't want to start having to sort of arch around here. That's where you'll make some mistakes that you don't need to make. And it doesn't matter if you do sort of slightly thicker line either, because it'll make it look a bit more natural. But yeah, so that's highlighting. It's very subtle, as you can see, but once you do it all around the miniature, it'll make it stand out a lot more, and it'll make the recesses look a lot better, and it'll make everything stand out a lot more. So I'm just going to probably take away the miniature again, just to get those steps done so that I'm not creating a horrendously long video. I'll stick around here until I get bored, until I get bored of trying to think of things to say. If anything comes to mind, I'll let you know. This is the stage that you have to be careful if you want it to go to this level. Again, like I said, you can stop at the previous level. And on these sort of abdominal things, I'm just going to put a little dot on each one and edge highlight the top of this armour here. Just catch the edges of this armour plate here, and actually I'm going to put a dot on each of these sort of rivets as well. The way that I do that, I load up the brush with as much paint as I can, as I feel comfortable with, like a splodge like that. Ever so slowly and gently, just go up to the miniature without pushing until I see it hit the rivet, and I move it away, directly away from it. So up. Put too much on that last one, that's fine. Up, like that. And that last one, I'm just gonna move the pigment away. There you go. And what I quite like about this purple is it kind of makes them look like they've been through like a forge or like the fire of battle or something like that. So it makes the armor look hot. The armor looks hot. That's just a little bit of something to define it from other people's painting, I think. And it just gets us thinking about, you know, how can we apply similar effects to other paint schemes that we're doing? How do we elevate something by adding just a little bit extra in? Because I truly think that more is more when it comes to miniature painting. You can have a simple scheme and you can have a simple colour palette. You can paint in a simple manner, there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, painting more layers and more detail, even simply, will make your miniature stand out. So, as you've seen me do just there, I'm going to do this around the entire miniature and then bring it back once it's done. Okay, so I've pretty much done that on all of the parts of the miniature that I want to do it on. I haven't highlighted this arm here because that will be hidden by the shield and there's no need to do that. But one interesting thing that has happened is I've made a mistake here. I've put too much silver on the face. It doesn't look really like the rest of the miniature. So what am I going to do about it? I'm just going to take a bit of Garros Dunes, and because it's the same tone as the rest of the armour is now, if I just put a tiny bit on my brush, I can make that silver look a bit more gold. So if I keep that there very still, I just wash that over that. I can just take some of the silver away from that. And you might want to do that over all the entire miniature, right? You might want to do that here, because you'll still get the highlight. It'll make it look slightly gold. But I'm going to leave it like that because I think it's quite cool. It looks like the armour's slightly worn as well. Put a little bit of Garros Dunes just there to tone that highlight down. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. Most importantly, if you do this, make sure you have fun, because I think this is a very fun way to paint gold. It doesn't actually take too long. I mean, I think the time away from the screen, other than the drying time, me painting these highlights, me painting the sort of purple shadows, maybe took an extra half an hour from what you've seen. And I appreciate I could have left that in the video, but I didn't know exactly how long that was going to take. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for sticking around to listen to the outro and see the showcase.
Thanks for joining me. I'm sure you can agree that painting gold can be rewarding and fun. Let me know what miniatures you'll paint with this guide in the comments. If you want to support me more, why not check out my Patreon, where you'll get access to a lot of exclusive content and a direct line to me so you can ask miniature painting questions. Speaking of Patreon, this is a list of awesome mini painters that are part of the Paint Beast community, which we call the Paint Herd. If you want to lend your strength to the Paint Herd, why not check the link in the description below and become a member. And as a special mention, here is a shout out to the Beastigore tier. Andrew Maystone, Andy Smith, Gerard Barber, Gerardo Lopez Gill, Jason Ozawagosh, Jeremy Williams, MC Van Wyck, Neil Buxton, Nicholas Paredes Carvajal, and Stephen. Well, that's all for now, so until next time, unleash the paint beast within and get painting that plastic.